All right, we should be going live any moment now. Good afternoon, I guess, at this point in time. It's February, dang it. It is December 26th, day after Christmas. Let's go ahead and get talking about what's going on in Ukraine right now. And by the way, as always on these live streams, you're getting basically the my exact raw reactions and what's going on my screen. So be prepared for there to be errors or mistakes. But as always, we try and get you the best possible information on what's going on over there. As soon as you tune in, please absolutely drop a comment so I can see that you're here, and be sure to ask any questions as well so we can address anything that may be coming up. Thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and get started over here with the big news of the day. And I'm going to say it, start with, this is how it started. A nice landing craft sitting in Feodosia. This is how it's going, that landing craft in Feodosia. The situation here is very interesting. We've had a lot of information come in overnight. Literally, this happened right after my yesterday live stream. So let's go ahead and keep going on. And that makes this a Christmas gift for Ukraine. In occupied Feodosia, Crimea, large explosions have rocked the Navy base there. And Jason J. Smart states that more Russian Navy going to join the Moskva. And I'll tell you, it looks like this is pretty accurate. President Zelensky said, "I am grateful to our Air Force for the spectacular addition of another vessel to the Russian submarine Black Sea Fleet." So they're getting a little smug over there in Ukraine over this one, at least so far. The Russian authorities in Crimea stated that one person was killed and 2 were injured as a result of the attack. They also said 6 buildings were damaged, mostly with broken windows, and 6 people evacuated to temporary accommodation centers, with the others going to live with friends and relatives. There's reason to believe that this is, shall we say, insufficient information. According to the Crimean Wind channel, according to their sources, about 1/3 of the crew of the Novocherkassk has died in this explosion. Now, the ship is a Project 775 Rapucha class ship. It could carry between 87 and 98 people as part of its standard crew. It's a landing ship, of course, so it could carry tons of cargo or tons of people if they had it outfitted for a landing operation. But overall, it looks like it was at least partially staffed in order to carry out probably loading and unloading operations. So why do we think there's more to this than meets the eye? Well, for one thing, the Russians have pretty much lied every time one of their ships has been sunk. But more importantly, I believe that the Crimean government authority there was only speaking of those who were on land, not on those who were on the ship itself. They also reported that the ship was damaged. In fact, the explosion was so massive, it blew apart pieces of the nearby harbor, and it shows this is the train station. The windows are shattered and window frames are pushed in. The train station has stopped operations. And this is a fragment of the ship. Now, it is sitting somewhere in the middle of Feodosia. Apparently, there are pieces of the ship scattered all around the area around the port. So it was not a small explosion in any way, shape, or form. Ukraine finally reported that they did sink this large landing ship, making it official this morning. Now, there's a picture here. There it is. Here is a picture of let me just move this over here so I don't miss it. Here's a picture of the vessel after the overnight attack. Now, that's kind of small to see. Let me see if I can get it a little bit larger there. There we go. This blackened mess down here on the bottom, all along here, this is what's left of the landing ship. The whole front end is basically underwater. There's just mangled remains in the position. Pieces of it found all over the city nearby. Clearly, this is more than just damaged. But that's what they report to Vladimir Putin, as that the ship was damaged. The UK Defense Minister, I think is what his position is. Let me see. Secretary of State for Defense. There we go. He says this latest destruction of Putin's navy demonstrates that those who believe there's a stalemate in the Ukraine war are wrong. They haven't noticed that over the past 4 months, 20% of Russia's Black Sea fleet has been destroyed. There was some speculation, though, and the speculation is still ongoing. The Ukrainians have said that they need additional reconnaissance in Feodosia, and they need to get some comprehensive information on all the affected targets. They believe it is likely that another ship was damaged because everything in the port infrastructure is pretty close over in Feodosia. And that ship might be this one. It looks like it's a seagoing tug, or possibly the MB-304. It was moored very close to the Novocherkassk and may have been affected as well. We haven't seen pictures, at least, of any of it over here. Hi, Lucille. Thank you very much for joining me. Glad to have you here. Now, let's move on to, that's, of course, all the information we kind of have on the ship right now. Believe that either that maybe about a third of the crew may have been outright killed, with many more injured. The ship is in pieces all over Feodosia, and on top of that, the Russians are denying everything. But there's more to the story, as always. For instance, there's suddenly this big concentration of ships on the outer roadstead of Ovchumchira, which is in the unrecognized Georgian breakaway region of Abkhazia. It looks like the Russians are really want to move their ships out of Crimea and into territory they don't think the Ukrainians can reach. This is one of their potential port locations. They've already started construction and dredging. I don't believe they've actually finished the operation so far, but interesting to see them basically running for their lives to get away from Crimea. Anton Herashchenko reported that 2 Russian ships left Feodosia harbor in Crimea several hours after the Ukrainian attack. This includes a larger military ship and a military boat-sized vessel. So it's pretty clear that they don't think they're comfortable in Feodosia anymore. Those that were taking videos, though, they got to watch out, because Russia's already threatening them with criminal cases. Arrivals of missiles are not a reason to jump on balconies in shorts and shoot videos. They're pretty ticked off this information's getting out before they can take control of the narrative. Ben Hodges, a former general of the U.S. Army in Europe and a NATO senior mentor for logistics, stated that imagine if Ukraine had another 100 ATACMS, Taurus, Storm Shadow, or Scalp. Crimea would be an untenable base for Russia. No Navy, no Air Force, no drone launches against innocent civilians, no logistics hub to sustain Russian defenses in southern Ukraine, no Kerch Bridge. And it's really clear that there is a lot of everything rides on Crimea. All the goals of the military operation, every intended result of this entire war that Vladimir Putin had, all goes to pot if Crimea is recaptured by Ukraine. It is literally the linchpin of everything they were hoping to accomplish. They wanted a land route to Crimea so they could resupply it without having to use the bridge. They wanted the naval base in Novorossiysk. They wanted, Sevastopol. They wanted they want the ability to control all of the Black Sea. They wanted to eventually take over an entire land route to Transnistria, the breakaway region of Moldova. So everything is based on Crimea. You cut off Crimea, you cut off and capture Crimea, and all of a sudden, everything that Russia has spent the last 9, almost 10 years trying to accomplish literally goes away. Those breakaway regions in Donbass and Luhansk, they're worthless at that point. There's no point in even worrying about them. Yes, they'll probably still try to keep them, but how much are they willing to invest if the Western world will actually put the manpower, effort, and equipment into that area? Without Crimea, they're worthless. They'd mean nothing. They're just a couple of interesting areas with no particular major amounts of resources compared to the entirety of the former Soviet Union or Russia as it stands today. And something I've noticed is every time there's a major event that happens to Russian equipment, all of a sudden the Russians report all kinds of crazy things happening. Actually, they start doing it. They start launching heavy artillery shelling at civilian targets. This is a repeated pattern and something they do every single time there's bad news. So Kherson has been subject to heavy shelling for the last 2 hours. This is reported as of about 3 hours ago now. So that's a lot of shelling going on. They're targeting civilians to punish for military targets being destroyed. By the way, I don't remember where it is in here, but the Russians also claimed that they shot down 2 Su-24 fighters that launched the Storm Shadow missiles at the landing ship. No proof, of course, and Ukraine isn't forwarding it. Just be advised that that report is out there. I do not put any actual stock into it. Now let's go over to Dmitry at War Translated. He found this little bit from a Russian source here. Let me see. I better move my head out of the way so you can read the whole thing. There we go. If we look at the situation with the strikes of the Ukrainian armed forces on the large landing craft as a whole, we have the following. The enemy is systematically knocking out our large landing craft, which, in addition to performing current logistics tasks, are also a reserve in case of damage to the Crimean Bridge. After the majority of the large landing craft are disabled, the enemy can launch another attack on the Crimean Bridge, as well as systematize attacks on the crossings in the north of Crimea. After this, the enemy will publicly announce the blockade of Crimea, which will create an argument for increasing the supply of long-range weapons. So this, again, it all comes back to Crimea in some way, shape, or form. Because this is what they're looking at. If Ukraine can knock out all their large landing craft and anything that can carry large amounts of ordnance and hardware, then they can damage or destroy the bridge. Then Crimea is entirely locked off from direct resupply. There'll be no military hardware coming in, no ability to bring more in, and they'll be able to interdict any of the smaller craft that are coming in, which would not be able to bring in the quantity of materiel required to successfully prosecute the war. By the way, the report that we have so far is that it was Storm Shadow missiles, not Storm Shadow missiles. It was UAVs. It was Shahed drones that were on the landing ship. Though I don't necessarily put direct stock in just that. My guess is it was an overall ordnance loadout, probably with artillery shells, ammunition, and of course, possibly a bunch of drones. All vital war material for Russia that I believe were probably on board that ship when it went up in smoke. And that's kind of the big news for today, the landing ship that was destroyed over in Crimea. I got some more stuff, but I'm going to take a brief pause here. Anybody got any questions at this point in time? Not seeing anything so far, but if you do, or if you have any comments, absolutely chime in. Let's go ahead and continue on. We've got some information on the news out of Ukraine. Zaluzny gave a press conference, I believe it was yesterday. And what did he say about the mobilization and the war? Actually, I think it was this morning, their time. He did say that the military didn't specify the 500,000 number that are planning to be mobilized for next year. He does kind of say that they just put their requirements out there for what they need for shells, weapons, and people, and it's the Ministry of Defense's problem to figure out how many, and then to put that into the legislation to go forward. But he said that they did not specifically state 500,000. The new mobilization rules will include lowering the age to 25 years, simplifying the procedure, and stricter sanctions for evasion, including fines and imprisonment. It also includes the possibility of demobilizing those who serve more than 3 years. That means if you joined up when the invasion happened, you could potentially serve to February of not next year, but the year after. 2022, 23, 24, yep, to 2025, and then you would be demobilized, as in you'd be released from your service. Now, there are, of course, a bunch of caveats and yeah buts and all that kind of thing involved there, but it looks like there's an end in sight. They'll need a lot of men in order to be able to accomplish demobilizing some of those soldiers who have fought hard for so long. But he did state, we are an army and we must fight and not interfere in the lives of civilians. He did express some skepticism over the provisions on the mandatory rotation of military personnel after 6 months. He said we'll need to double the military in order to actually do that, but they can't predict it. And it'll depend on the actual needs for it. Rotation means that they'd be pulled off the front lines and given a break. They do already do some of this rotation, but the troops are still kept pretty close to the front lines by and large. He did say that next year will be very different from 2023, and they're working on everything to make sure of that. There's no need to get too hung up on this and make a tragedy out of the loss of any individual settlement. The conduct of hostilities is subject to its own laws, regardless of whether commanders, politicians, or journalists like it. That's right, it doesn't matter what I think. I'm not the one with a rifle in the trench. And I'm not the one on the other side with a tank and a missile. So no matter what, the battle lines will change. We don't get a vote in the matter on each day. And the loss of any one piece of ground is not catastrophic as it stands right now. The government did submit a draft law on mobilization. That includes the 450 to 500,000 people number. There is a drill going on in Kiev, and that is the Armed Forces of Ukraine, in collaboration with the local government, police, and other units, will conduct security drills, setting up temporary checkpoints, installing restrictive signs, and conducting vehicle inspections. These types of drills are still required in case there's an actual emergency where they're required. You want your guys to be good at it when it does happen. President Zelensky also expressed a lot of gratitude to those enterprises who are providing the desired result for their soldiers. This will be the year 2024 should be a time of significant growth in the domestic defense production, and they're going to provide contracting and budget for those purposes. They're paying special attention to all types of drones, in particular first-person view and ammunition. Ukraine must become capable of providing all the necessary needs for drones, looking at local production. And I'm going to go ahead and just quickly switch over into Russia because there's only a few things today. We're pretty light on overall news, but it is the day after Christmas for us, and other news has kind of been a little bit slow to respond. You can tell that the situation that Vladimir Putin may be losing a bit of face when Lukashenko feels at ease with making fun of the situation in Russia. In particular, he poked fun at the Russian egg shortage in front of Putin. And this is after Vladimir Putin asked him to help him out. At the moment, though, it looks like the Russian industry is told that the price of eggs are not to rise. Everything is to be price fixed until at least after the presidential election. And this bit from Supernova Plus, and I put this here in the Russia section for a reason. And it's talking about NATO missiles striking this large landing ship in Feodosia. The ship was burning and secondary detonation of ammunition was observed. And they state that this is the second time in a week that NATO weapons have dealt a heavy blow to our army. They also talk about the Patriots taking out the Su-34s and the potential that NATO AWACS aircraft are transmitting those coordinates. And the idea is that NATO is switching to a new tactic of knocking out the most expensive materiel, which must be replaced over the course of many years. It's kind of like the value of knocking out a tank or a BMP is much higher than the value of knocking out a few soldiers, because the tank and the BMP will have to go to industry and may take months or years or longer to replace. Things like landing ships, potentially decades. They do specify that the tactic is only possible if there is guidance from aircraft in the sky that are launched from the neutral waters of the Black Sea. Hi, Robert. Glad to have you on board today. I'm really happy to have people coming on and seeing while I'm live so I can get some of the interaction with you guys, which is the fun part of doing these things live. So glad to have you here. Absolutely chime in with your comments as we go. Moving back to the Supernova Plus item here, they are basically saying that those NATO aircraft in neutral waters are things that they may want to start targeting. And if they do, they're opening up a whole new can of worms. But it's a situation that's going to have to be watched carefully. If the Russians have already been playing fast and loose with NATO borders, with drones hitting on Romanian soil, I suspect they're going to not like the results if a U.S. Poseidon or something like that ends up being targeted and shot down. Not happy would be the words I would use. All right, we're going to stop here for just a moment. So you guys have any questions at this moment? We're going to be moving on to international in just a moment. Over here, it has been, we had a good Christmas over here. The family seems to be pretty happy. It is the church across the street from me here is still playing Christmas carols on the bells on every hour. So if you hear a Christmas carol in the middle of it, that's where it's coming from. In addition, it looks like we're going to get a little bit of snow tonight. We've got a few flakes falling right now. I can actually have the window open enough for me to see, and also to keep things the right temperature in here. So temperatures are nice, but we're just pretty busy here on Christmas season. All right, I'm going to move on to international here, and there's just a little bit. We got a shorter one today, which I'm pretty nice about. So let's go ahead and move on. The first group of Ukrainian pilots completed basic training in the Royal Air Force of the United Kingdom and are currently undergoing training in F-16 fighter jet operations in Denmark. They're progressing. They're going to have the pilots in position in short order. Those F-16s are also being modernized before they're sent to Ukraine, probably with potentially newer radar and some potentially newer avionics and electronics. Either way, they'll be compatible with pretty much the whole spectrum of NATO ordnance and NATO capabilities. This brings a lot to the table. Interestingly enough, tens of thousands of sights from American companies are being imported to Russia for installation on hunting weapons. This would fall under the so-called dual-use items. Then those same optics are reaching the front. Apparently, there were 16 billion rubles worth of sights imported into Russia in the 2022 to 2023 period. And these sites are mostly from American companies and imported with parallel imports, circumventing sanctions with the help of people like China, Turkey, and Kazakhstan. The largest importers of these sites are online stores of hunting paraphernalia, Pointer and Navigator. Both stores sold goods to rifle manufacturers and arms companies, some of which have ties to the military, such as Wagner PMC. Basically, this is an aspect of sanctions that's going to have to be tightened up. There should be no American optics sitting on top of a Russian rifle in Ukraine right now. None. The Insider, which is a Russian language news organization, actually have multiple languages, has been looking at the situation between Russia and Finland. And they've noted that every time the border's been opened, they've been stormed by Arab Arab migrants. The influx of these refugees is happening under the full control of Russian security forces. The flow of migrants rushing to the border is the Kremlin's version of revenge for Finland's entry into NATO. It's punishment. They want to make sure that Finland knows that they are not happy, and this is the only thing they can do at this point is cause a crisis of immigration on that border. The thing is that it's being done from Russia, which means that it's pretty obvious who's pulling it off. South Korea has updated the list of goods prohibited for export to Russia, including aviation parts and cars. That'll be started in January 2024. I don't think they were selling very many of them already. I know that Hyundai, which is a I believe it's Korean. Hyundai actually pulled out their operations, sold them for a token number of rubles, and then pulled out entirely. I think overall this is just putting into official practice what they were probably already doing to a certain extent. Sweden's looking at the situation and saying, hey, look, we need ammunition too, and we got to send some to Ukraine. That means that the capacity in the factories must increase because we have too much need for this right now. I'm putting this one out there because just because of the information that it touches on. The Russians are already talking about how they're going to intervene in the U.S. presidential election next year. It doesn't really much matter what side or who or anything like that. All they want to sow is chaos in the U.S., and that chaos will be good for Russia's military aims. The more chaos they can create, the more acrimony, the more blame going back and forth, the more they will be able to take advantage of the situation. And Japan is stepping up now. Now, they've been working on their constitution to make it so they can provide lethal aid over time. But in the meantime, they're still providing what equipment they can. In this case, Mitsubishi Type 73s. Those are these SUV type vehicles, basically off-road vehicles. And they also included, I think it was there's some kind of a material carrier vehicle on board as well. There it is. So they're definitely stepping up to the plate, showing that they have interests in stopping Russian aggression. Remember that Japan may be on the other side, but they are right next to Russia, and that is a major concern for them. They're less concerned about China, at least immediately, because China doesn't really seem to be directly looking at Japan as a place they want to invade. Taiwan's pretty unhappy with them overall, but Japan is looking at Russia as their big bad that they've got to watch out for. And that's the international news. It's been, like I said, a bit of a light day today, so we're going to probably get through this pretty quick. Brief pause, see if anybody's got anything they want to pipe in with, say, or anything like that. I did see a comment with somebody who said, do you know what you're even talking about? You have some very informed people that watch you. I'm like, yeah, I know I've got informed people that watch me. And I want you to know that I appreciate every single one of you, and I do my best to provide the best possible information that is available on the Ukraine war. In every case, I try and vet it through multiple sources, try and provide the best information. Sometimes I may miss a vital detail, though, so be sure to let me know if I do. I think the example in question was the vehicles that were being scrapped in Britain because they didn't meet the emission standards. And I was not well informed on that one, so I just touched on it briefly. Overall, though, I want you to know that everything I look at, I try and get through multiple sources, multiple directions, and do the best to understand it. And I absolutely am thankful to every one of you who watches and pays attention and provides additional information and context. We're going to move over to the front lines next. And we're light today again. Everything's kind of light today, but it's good to have things be a little bit quieter. 2 explosions in occupied Berdyansk, according to the mayor of Melitopol. No information on what they hit, but it seems to be a regular occurrence now. The Russians launched a bunch of rockets at the Dnipro River. I think they were still ticked off over the landing ship. No changes on the front lines. In fact, let me see if there's anything new as of today, and we'll see it live on the fly. Nothing new added just yet. So we'll just go ahead and continue on right now. There's another source I'll check real fast before we call it good. The Ukrainian forces have reported that their troops have left Marinka. Now, some people are making some hay out of a statement by Zaluzny saying that Ukrainian troops remain in the north of Marinka. However, if you read this carefully, it looks like he's talking about the outskirts, just outside of town, and are set up positions outside the city. So they're not in the remains of Marinka, at least as far as I can tell. Some other sources tried to make a bunch of hay out of it, saying that, oh, look at this. The Russians say they've captured it. The Ukrainians are saying they're still in there, but then they say in this other place or not. It doesn't really much matter whether there's a few Ukrainian forces inside the city limits or not. The overall effect is there is a bunch of rubble. The Russians have taken control of it in all effective manner, and the Ukrainians are just outside and basically holding the line just outside those limits. And that looks kind of like this. Let me see if I can get this a little bit bigger. Okay, now if you look here, there is a dam right here that they're saying is the current defensive line. Now, when I say dam, I usually think of like the Hoover Dam, enormous concrete structures, hundreds of feet tall, that are holding back millions of gallons of water. And this is likely something that's about 20 feet tall, 30 feet tall, and is holding back a small estuary, or in this case, dividing a small reservoir. So we're not talking like an enormous dam when we say dam here. We're talking something relatively small. But this is kind of the overall situation in Marinka at this point. And you can see that Ukraine has established their defensive lines just outside the city limits. Now, Zaluzny did state something about Avdiivka, and I think this could be put into the context of if nothing changes. And the announcement was that the Russians could capture Avdiivka in 2 to 3 months, assuming nothing changes. The Russians are basically throwing meat wave after meat wave, more hardware and equipment, but each time that's still a little bit more territory they're able to move into, a little bit farther, just a little extra nibble, a little extra more, a little half a building, an extra tree line. Each time they're getting just a little bit farther, even if they're losing 80, 90% of the soldiers. That still leaves 10 to 20% to capture a piece of territory and hold that line. So the situation in Avdiivka is going to get increasingly tenuous unless the right support shows up at the right time. And that's the front lines. There's not a whole lot to say today. The situation over here near Krinky has not appreciably changed, except for the lack of glide bombs striking. There's no real changes over here near Robotna at all. And Marinka didn't even change. They just decided that today was the day they were going to say that they captured it officially again, because they've said it now 3 times. No changes near Avdiivka hasn't even had any changes to speak of today. So far, at least from the reports I've seen. Klishchiivka, no changes. I mean, basically, the situation is as it is, static today compared to yesterday's report. And that's the front lines. Now let's move on to the extra in just a moment here. Any questions before I do? I have got 2 cats in the office with me today. One is napping on a stool that I keep nearby, and the other one's napping on a piece of rug, staring at the door a little bit. I think he doesn't want out, but he's interested at going out of the office. So I'll be watching him closely. But yeah, the cats seem to be really loving being in my office these days, and just fun to have. If one of them jumps on top of me, you'll know why. Now, there's not a lot in the extras today, and there's a reason for that. Again, today is a relatively light news day. I'm going to show you this video as the final item. It's not, I typically end with like a cat video or something like that. I didn't find any today, but this is interesting. Let me go ahead and pop over here. And let me see if how this looks if I do, nope, that's picture in picture. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and play this video. Don't need the music because that's probably going to get copyright striked. Okay. If you see this, this armored personnel carrier traveling along here, you can see a couple of soldiers rise up to try and jump on board. And yet the transport doesn't stop. It doesn't do anything to let them get on board. In fact, it accelerates and moves away. And this soldier runs after it. Let's see. Yep, we can still see what's going on. It'll be centered there. Okay. And he runs for quite a while as the armored personnel carrier continues on. He almost even makes it, but then he trips at the last minute and falls down, and then he gives up. Now, this is a Russian soldier. This is a Russian APC. I only share this with you because there's still a human cost for both sides, an enormous human cost. Whether you're on the winning side, the losing side, whether you're on the whether you're on the right or in the wrong. Many of these people want nothing to do with this war. And I think that we need to keep that in mind, even for both sides on that. Of course, Russia could end the war in a moment. All they'd have to do is leave. But as long as there's a thirst for power, as long as there is the desire to rule not just your own piece of world, but to rule the area next door, the next nation, the next continent, there will be young men or even old men who will suffer and die because of the greed of those who are in power. And that's my thoughts for today. Kind of a bit of a downer there at the end, but I want you to know that that the human cost of this war is enormous. But they're fighting for their freedom over there. The Ukrainians are, and that makes for a just cause. And let's take a quick pause here. Is there any questions or comments before I close up the stream? I do appreciate you guys showing up. We had a few viewers here and a few comments. I appreciate that. If I get things closed down, yes, Lucille points out, women and children caught in the crossfire. It's the human cost is enormous. It's your cause can be just, but that doesn't make it cheap. And the cost of human suffering and potential is enormous. Thank you again for joining me today. If you enjoyed today's stream, absolutely hit that thumbs up. You have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next one, hopefully tomorrow.